All right, so let's talk about adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So there are 4 steps that we always have to run through when we are adding or subtracting. The first step is we have to find the least common multiple of the denominators, that LCM. Remember, the tool or the trick that we use to help us find the LCM is that Venn diagram. Check out my video if you do not remember how to do that. So we have to find the least common multiple of the denominators, which is also sometimes called the LCD, or the least common denominator. These two terms are used interchangeably. They mean the exact same thing. So in my problem over here, I have the fractions 3/5 plus 1/2. The least common multiple, or the least common denominator, is going to be the number 10. So I have to turn both of these fractions into fractions equivalent fractions that have a denominator of 10. So I'm going to use my scale factors here to help me out. So my scale factor to turn 5 into 10 would be times 2. And whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 3 times 2 would give me 6/10. My scale factor to turn 2 into 10 would be times 5. Again, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 1/2 with a denominator of 10 would be 5/10. So I've created those equivalent fractions. And now that I have the least common denominator and they are the same, I'm going to add or subtract the numerator only. Okay, so my denominator always stays the same. It never, ever, ever changes. So I have 6/10 plus 5/10. 6 plus 5 gives me 11, and 10 stays the same, so it still is a denominator of 10. So 11/10 is currently an improper fraction. Remember, it's got a bigger numerator and a smaller denominator, and I can't leave it as an improper fraction. So I have to put my answer always into the simplest form. So to go from an improper fraction to a mixed number, my strategy is to divide. So 10 goes into 11 one time. I have one piece left over, so 11/10 as a mixed number is 1 and 1/10. All right, so let's do a few examples together. I have 5/6 plus 1/12. So step number 1 is I have to find the least common denominator, and I know that I can turn 6 into the number 12. So 12 is going to be my least common denominator. So my scale factor to turn 6 into 12 would be times 2. So 5/6 turns into 10/12. And then I don't have to do anything to 1/12. It already has the common denominator. So I have my equivalent fractions. So I'm going to add or subtract. I'm going to add the numerators only. So 10 plus 1 would give me 11. My denominator stays the same, so 11/12. And then I just check to see, is it already in the simplest form? 11 is a prime number, and 12 cannot be divided by 11, so 11/12 is as simple as it's going to get. Okay, for our next one, I have 7/10 minus 1/4. So again, I need to find the least common multiple, the least common denominator. The least common multiple of 10 and 4 is actually going to be the number 20. So my scale factor for 7/10 is going to be times 2. So that's going to have an equivalent fraction of 14/20. Minus, to turn 4 into a denominator of 20, that my scale factor would be times 5. So its equivalent fraction would be 5/20. And you might be thinking, well, couldn't I just turn this into a denominator of 40? I know 10 goes into 40, and so does 4. And the answer is yes. I could technically turn these into equivalent fractions with a denominator of 40 and still get the same answer. But the bigger multiple that I use for my denominator, just the more simplifying I have to do at the end. So if I'm able to find that least common denominator and use that, it just cuts back on simplifying at the very end of our process. But again, either way, you still, if you do it correctly, still should get the same answer. So I'm going to subtract my numerators. 14 minus 5 gives me 9. My denominator stays the same, so 9/20. 9 and 20 don't have any factors in common. The only factor of 9 other than 9 itself would be the number 3, and 20 is not divisible by 3, so 9/20 is as simple as it gets. All right, our next one is 5/12 plus 1/3. So I know that I can turn my thirds into a denominator of 12, so I'm going to keep 5/12 the same. plus, to find my equivalent fraction, my scale factor would be times 4. So that would become 4/12. Add the numerators. 5 plus 4 gives me 9/12. Now, 9 and 12 have a factor in common. They're both divisible by 3. So 9 divided by 3 would give me 3. 12 divided by 3 would give me 4. And 3/4 is my final answer. It's as simple as it gets. Moving on to 1/6 plus 3/4. The least common denominator for 6 and 4 is going to be the number 12. So my scale factor to turn 6 into 12 would be times 2. So my equivalent fraction would be 2/12. Plus 3/4. My scale factor to turn 4 into 12 would be times 3. So my equivalent fraction would be 9/12. So I have 2 plus 9 gives me 11, and 12 stays the same. Moving on for our next one, I have 3/4 minus 1/8. This one, they have a common denominator of 8. So my 1/8 stays the same. And then I have 3/4. So my scale factor here would be times 2. So 3 times 2 gives me 6. 4 times 2 gives me 8. 6 minus 1 is 5/8. So 5/8. And then our very last one, 3 and 18. I have a common denominator of 18. So I get to leave 3/18 alone. My scale factor would be times 6 for an equivalent fraction of 12/18. So 12 minus 3 gives me 9/18. They're both divisible by 9. So simplified, it becomes 1/2. Oops, running off the screen.